Okay, peeps, welcome back. So today we're going to be talking about Bitcoin and why I believe that the bull run is about ready to begin. And when I say bull run, I mean the real one, not the one that we saw back in March. So with that being said, let's get it. Okay, so the thing I want you guys to notice here is that I have Bitcoin and the dollar pulled up next to each other. So let me start by saying this. Bitcoin and the US dollar do have an inverse correlation. There's a reason for that because when the dollar goes up, money is flowing into the dollar versus flowing out of Bitcoin. When the price of Bitcoin goes up and the dollar goes down, money is flowing out of the dollar versus money flowing into Bitcoin. So it's basically an inverse relationship. One of the reasons why I think we're not at a peak in Bitcoin, as you guys can see in the 2017 peak back here, this is on the monthly time frame, by the way. These are both on monthlies, so it's much easier for y'all to see. But in the end of 2017, as you guys can see here on the RSI, we hit a massive oversold signal of 95. Okay, the highest this thing can go is 100. And you can see the previous cycles even all the way back here. I can't really show you this on the actual price action chart. Had basically have to zoom out here to show you, but it's pretty obvious where the peaks are, right? So April 13, November 13, we hit a massive 93, 94, 95, somewhere in there. And then we had this huge 2021 peak. And then we have this peak, which is not really that high. As you guys can see, it pretty much topped out. Every true cycle peak was roughly around a 95-ish or so. So on this one, we're only at a 75. Do keep that in mind. That's one of the reasons why I think we're not done with the bull run. Another reason is because, and I'll show you guys this in a minute, but basically the flash crash that we had in this month, the 17% drop on the NASDAQ, yada, yada, the drop on Bitcoin, all that jazz. In my opinion, that was basically what that will do is, in my opinion, this is not a guarantee, but in my opinion, it will serve as the correction that we needed in order for the markets to go up for the rest of the year. Why is that? Because the Fed's getting ready to cut rates. That's bullish for the markets generally over the long term. It's also an election year. Okay, no politician or presidential candidate, as it were. It doesn't matter what side of the fence you're on, Republican, Democrat, Independent, doesn't matter. Anybody that's running for office does not want the stock market to go down. It's quite simple because generally people that have money, they're lobbyists, special interest groups. They generally donate money to these politicians in order to get favors, as it were, when they get elected. So, of course, the politicians want to see the markets do good during the year that they're going to get elected, right? Because the people with the money, the lobbyists, the billionaires, all that stuff, they're donating to these people so they can get certain things put in certain bills or whatever. So it's kind of how it works. Everybody knows about it. So that's another reason. Okay. And yes, I do think the drop we just saw, that crazy flash crash, is going to lead to a rally throughout the rest of the year, including in crypto. That's exactly what I think. I think it's going to be much better than people expect. So, anyways, so the US dollar versus Bitcoin. The thing I want to point out here is you see back here, Bitcoin was kind of flat, right? And the dollar was going up. What happened when the dollar went down? Oh, guess what? Look at the chart on the left. Bitcoin was going up as the dollar was going down. Then when Bitcoin went down, the dollar went up. Okay. And Bitcoin went up again when the dollar topped out and the dollar started going down, while Bitcoin went up in 2021. And then the dollar went up. And what happened to Bitcoin? It did have a second peak, but it generally speaking went down. And what did we just see here? In a topping of the dollar. And then as the dollar topped, Bitcoin has been going up. But here's the kicker, though. I think we're not actually done with the bull run. Okay, so I think Bitcoin's going to go to new all-time highs by the end of the year. I think that's when that's going to start happening. I'll show you guys the fib targets here in a minute. But the thing I want to point out here about the dollar is it does look like we might potentially be getting a breakdown here. What I'm looking for on the monthly is a break of this trend line. So roughly a fall below 1026. As you guys can see, it's testing right here. I do think it's going to happen pretty quick here. It's probably going to start taking effect immediately once the Fed announces next month that they're going to cut rates, because the market's pretty much betting on 100% certainty that the Fed is going to cut at some level next month. But for the true bull run to begin, I'd be looking for at least a weekly close below this 100 level. Okay. So the psychology behind this, why the dollar would go down, is basically when the Fed cuts rates, high yield savings accounts, bonds, and cash equivalents that pay high interest, like certificates of deposit and stuff like that, they're not going to pay as much money. Okay, whatever the Fed funds rate is going to be reflected in the bond yields and the CDs and the high interest savings accounts. Okay, so when they start cutting, those interest rates that investors are getting paid are going to go down. So the dollar is going to go down, and then the money that is invested in cash equivalents is going to flow out of the dollar back into risk on assets, and that's theoretically why Bitcoin should be going up. So now I want to, before we actually get into Bitcoin here, so we took a look at the monthly. Pretty much the rest of the video that we're going to look at here is going to be the weekly. But before I do that, the things that I want to show you guys here is the NASDAQ. So I want to show you guys the NASDAQ here. Basically, every time we have a major correction, it does end up ripping back to the upside. You guys can see we're already back inside of this broadening rising wedge. But this was a very fast, very aggressive sell-off. This was not a normal sell-off. If there was going to be a sell-off around this time of year, I wouldn't have expected it to happen like this. So we went down roughly about minus 16, minus 17%, and literally just a matter of weeks. You guys can see it was literally only 4 red weeks here, 5 actually, if you are counting this drawdown on this green candle. That is extremely fast. Okay, so basically it was a flash crash, black swan event. That's pretty much what that was. And I think that this right here was a setup for the markets to go up for the rest of the year. And I'm not the only one that thinks this. I've heard other people say it too. But that would be my conclusion as a trader, is that this correction was sufficient enough for the markets to rally for the rest of the year. And of course, we talked about the Bitcoin thesis too. So the other thing to note here is the VIX. Okay, so we had an insane spike on the VIX, but what happened? We came back and we closed down very low, less than a 23. If it was going to resurge, I would have thought it would resurge right off this trend line. That actually did not happen. It came back down below this trend line. So what that tells me, it closed below 20 on the weekly, and it is below the trend line. So likely the fear that the market had is pretty much over at this point, and I do expect the markets to go higher. So now going over to the weekly on Bitcoin, the idea here is pretty simple. Okay, so we're still in this bull flag. Nothing's changed. We are still holding barely, but we are holding this first level of macro support here. Once again, the bull flag target is all the way up here at 125,000. Now Bitcoin's actual top could be much higher than that, and I'm going to show you guys why here in a minute. So give me a second. Let me get this macro retracement. So you guys can see the macro fib levels here range quite a bit. So you have 102K, roughly about 155 to 160K, 208K, 220K, somewhere in there, and then all the way up to roughly about 240, 250K. I would say realistically, Bitcoin could probably top out maybe 2x that $75,000 level, so maybe 150,000, which is still much higher than that bull flag target. The other thing I'm kind of looking for here, I don't know if you guys noticed this, but basically we're looking for, I don't know why I can't get this thing to work right now. One second, y'all. So what we're looking for here is kind of like this breakout of the RSI. Okay, so you can see it happened here in 2021 when we got a break out of it. What happened? And of course, we got a rise above the EMAs here, bounce off support. That led to another massive rip to the upside. And we also saw this back here during this kind of accumulation. Well, okay, sorry, not this area. So this area right here, kind of during accumulation, Bitcoin was chopping around like we see right now. RSI was slowly going down, and what happened? We got a breakout, and then boom, Bitcoin took off for the moon. And we're seeing something very similar right now. Not exactly the same, but more or less the same, except it's a flag instead of just a sideways chop in this case. And once we get that break of the RSI, I expect the next leg of the bull run to continue to the upside, which I think could actually start possibly next month. Okay, so Next thing I want to get into here is the Bitcoin dominance. So as you guys know, we're basically looking for a breakdown of the Bitcoin dominance. It does look like the Bitcoin dominance wants to get up into this zone right here. I didn't think it was actually going to go this high, but that's kind of just what we're looking at. So you can see this is previous support here. It would be held as resistance. So I assume Bitcoin dominance is going to top out somewhere in here before we get a sell-off, maybe up at 60%. Again, there was kind of a topping area back here right around 60%. That would kind of make sense. And that was roughly about the level that this thing sat at before it had a massive capitulation last time to a huge alt season. But either way, we do need to see the Bitcoin dominance start to have a waterfall, lots of red candles on the Bitcoin dominance to see a massive alt season take place. The other thing I want to point out here is the ETH / BTC dominance. So this is basically the inverse of the Bitcoin dominance, okay? So when this thing has a breakout, then we know that all season is at hand. So Bitcoin dominance should be falling, this thing should be rising, and that's usually what we would see within alt season. So since this thing is falling, Bitcoin dominance is still basically dominant, and that's what we're looking at right now. All right, so let's get into the other metrics here. So crypto, once again, we're pretty much just sitting at lows here, 11. You can see the previous low was a 9. So the cycle peaks that we saw in 2021 was 100 and roughly about a 71. So again, when we got back to this 30 back in March, 34, not even close to the previous peaks. So once again, that tells me we're still very early, and likely the 75K level for Bitcoin is not the all-time high. So Bitcoin itself at a 15 right now. Once again, the cycle peaks measured here back during May, and let's see, when was this? January was 100. Even during this bear market swing level here, I can't get it exactly. June of 2022, it was an 80, and the highest we've seen so far is a 53. Once again, tells me likely we are not at the top, and we are still early in accumulation. Fear and greed. This tells me that right now, likely it is a very good time to be buying crypto. Again, generally the best times to buy crypto is when it's extremely boring, nothing is happening, and the prices are suppressed. Usually that's basically what we're looking at right now. So again, what you guys choose to do with that, that's up to you. But we're at a 31, which is pretty low. You can see last month we were at a 60, so big change there. And just taking a look at the chart here, you guys can see that usually speaking, when we get to these lows, what usually happens, we have a massive move up after that. Okay, not always, but in a lot of cases, that's the case. So, according to history, this is pretty close to not quite the perfect time to buy, but probably, in my guess, it's probably about as good as it's going to get. MVRV score, once again, we have not entered these zones up here. I suspect likely the crypto bull run is not going to top out until we get pretty close to these zones. Again, we're not even close to this. We're at basically a 1.5 right now, and the previous peak all the way back here was at roughly looks like about a 7 or so. So very cheap, very undervalued. Bitcoin rainbow chart. We're still in the basically buy zone between buy and basically a fire sale here. So very cheap. You guys can see this thing topped out in is this a bubble in the last cycle. So in my opinion, it probably could top out somewhere between still cheap and hodl. I don't really want to go too deep into what the prices are here, but basically we are looking at somewhere between 150 to 250,000 for a potential top on Bitcoin. Pi cycle top indicator. Two things to note here. Okay, so we did get below the yellow EMA. That has happened during bull runs and even during flash crashes, as you guys can see here. So it happened earlier in the bull run last year on Bitcoin, and it happened during the pandemic. It's even happened before that. Basically, at the start of the big bull run between 2015 and 2017, this thing did get below on a higher low and then take off. So just because it's below the yellow EMA does not mean that's a bearish sign. Okay, that it's normal. It's happened over the course of time. It's not really out of the ordinary. The other thing I want to point out is that we have not had a touching or crossing of the EMAs. That is usually the indication right there that the Bitcoin price has hit its top. And as of right now, the current price of the upper green band on Bitcoin is roughly about 98, 99,000. So that should tell you guys there is still massive upside here before we even get a breakout. Generally, when the price breaks above the green EMA, that usually indicates the final leg of the bull run. You can see it literally here in 2021, back here in 2017, all the way back here in 2013, and then again in early 2013. So anyways, this is Bitcoin, and Bitcoin, in my opinion, is looking very good. I think it's probably going to be anywhere from about a month all the way until about the end of the year before we see Bitcoin have its next big move up. But the fact that we're still in this flag and we have not had a breakdown, to me, is extremely bullish. So, and we are getting another bullish setup here on the RSI. And, if you guys want to accumulate, you can. If you don't want to, you don't have to. But just keep in mind the cycle only happens once every 4 years. So you basically would be waiting until roughly about the end of 2026, beginning of 2027 to get in at the lows of the next bear market. You got to ask yourself if it's worth it for you to wait for 2 or 3 years to get in on the next cycle. So anyways, hope you all enjoyed this content. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see y'all later. Peace.